Welcome to Starter TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton, and today I'm speaking with Linda Popky, author of Marketing Above the Noise. Linda, tell us a little bit about your career journey and what has made you so successful.
Well, it's interesting because I started out on the advertising side and then I went to the corporate side, and now I'm a consultant. But I've always been into creating things and writing and communicating, and so I think that's been kind of a consistent theme throughout my life. And one of the things that I think that's always made me successful is I've been able to look at things and come up very quickly with what the big idea is. But not only that, but be able to take that and then translate that into actually deliverables and getting something done. So there are big people idea, there are people who really work in the details, and I kind of cross through that. And then I think the other thing is persistence, what my mother would call stubbornness. But just I stick with something and I keep going and I get through it till it gets done.
What role have mentors played in your career?
Well, I've had a couple of really good mentors, and interestingly, the two that come to my mind right now have been men. When I first got out of school, I worked for a very small advertising agency outside of Boston. And my boss was a very high-strung, very nervous individual who made everybody around nervous. But the art director, the creative director, took me under his wing and he said, "Let me tell you how things work." And I said, "Well, I have this degree. I know everything." "No, you don't know anything." And he's the one who really taught me how business works and what you need to do and all that. And to this day, I mean, I think about some of the things that he taught me. And then my second mentor is the $1 million consultant, the guru of consulting, Alan Weiss. And he's really taught me a lot about what I need to do, not just to be a successful consultant, but how to think of my life in a very different way and how to be successful and to think from that abundance mentality. So you think about what's possible, not what's not possible.
What advice do you give young people who are entering the business world today? Such a crazy place out there now.
Wow, it's crazy. First of all, I think it's a wonderful time to be entering the world. A couple years ago we had a recession, we're through that. So now we have the opportunity to take advantage of all these incredible technologies. There's so much going on, everything's connected, there's so many opportunities in so many creative ways. So a couple of things. I think number one, you need to jump in there and find out what you want to do. And then second is you need to understand that whatever you choose today is not where you may wind up being in 20, 30, 40 years.
I know. So true.
You get out of college and you think, I have a daughter graduating from college, it's like, well, this is what I need to do next. You don't have to do that. You can start out one thing and decide you want to move. So follow your passion, do things that really make you feel good, and where you can contribute and where there's this kind of matching of your talents and passions and a need in the market. But understand that your whole life is not necessarily tied to what you choose today. And as opposed to when some of us parents, grandparents, older folks started out in the market, there were so many people that spent their entire career with one company. That just doesn't happen anymore. So it's very much accepted to work for one company, work for another company, work for yourself, do things, and take a year off and do something working for nonprofits or socially responsible types of endeavors, and just mix it all up. And that's sort of, you have this portfolio today, which I think is wonderful.
While we're on that topic, I'm curious, what do you think about how that plays on a resume now? Is it becoming more accepted to jump around a little more?
I think it is, as long as you show that you provided value in what you did. And of course, we don't do resumes the way we did in the old way. Our resume today is really LinkedIn and our web presence, and I tell people be very careful about what's posted about you online because it's not a matter of just putting things out there and deciding what you want people to see. Someone who's looking at you from a career perspective, they'll Google you, they'll check Facebook, they'll look at LinkedIn, they'll check your Twitter. So they'll look at all these different things, and you need to be very careful and mindful of that you are this sort of portfolio. But what's important is that whatever you do, there's a learning from. Here's what I did and here's what I accomplished. And then I moved on. And here's what I did at the next place. And you don't want to have the same year of experience 15 times. Right. You want to go on and do different things. Even if it's not a straight path up a career ladder, you want to have these very interesting experiences that make you a more desirable, more fascinating person for someone to work with.
So your book, Marketing Above the Noise, what's the central thesis?
We're in a world where there's just so much going on. We have the good news is we have all these ways to communicate with people today. And so we do that. And the bad news is, as consumers, we're just being hit by these messages. They're on our smartphones. We now have our fitness trackers that are starting to send data back and forth. Our cars are on the internet. So all these devices are sending messages, and marketers are getting in front of all these different ways and sending things out there. So consumers are just overwhelmed. There's just so much noise. It's as if you were sitting in a large cocktail party and everybody's talking at once. And so to get heard, you start talking louder and louder, and that just adds to the noise. And that doesn't work. And so what I said is, wait a minute, we have all these new technologies, we have social media, we have digital, we have mobile, we have all these other things, and yet it's still noisy. It's even noisier than before. How do you really be heard? And the idea is that you go back to the basics, to some of the things that were valuable and were true thousands of years ago, the basics of marketing. You implement the basics, and then you put the new realities in there so that you have this mix and you can be heard and you can stand out above the noise.
Who should read this book?
Who should read this book? Well, certainly anyone involved in marketing, whether you are leading a marketing department, or you are a marketer, or you're a student who possibly wants to get into marketing. But I also think executives and small business owners, CEOs or COOs, someone who says, how do I get my marketing people to be more effective? How do I get my marketing effort to be more effective? So anyone who has an interest in finding out how to really use marketing more effectively to build their business.
You talk about a dynamic market leverage model in your book. Tell us a little bit about this model and why it's important.
So what I tried to do was to say, let's look at those basics of marketing, the things that haven't changed, and let's figure out if we can create that down to a very simple model. And what I said is there's really 8 areas. You have to start with a strategy, and a strategy is not, I want to be on Facebook or I want to be looked at by so many people. A strategy is a business strategy. What is it you want your business or organization to accomplish? So you start with that. Then you start to look at, what are the markets that I'm in? What are they like? What are the people like there? What is the competition like? What is changing? So you start to understand sort of the market and the environment in which you're competing. You've got to know who your customers are, and the more you know about your customers, the better. The more you can even say, I put a name on a customer. I can create a persona around a customer and understand who they are, what they need, what motivates them, what their life is like. The more you can start to put yourself in their shoes and really build a product or service for them. And that leads to products and services. So you've got to have good products. If you don't, you can get away with it for a little bit of time, but you really can't for a long period of time. So you've got to have really good products and services and think about that. You've got to think about how you're going to sell those. And in some cases, it's with a sales force. Some cases, it's on the internet or on the web. In some cases, you sell by other people evangelizing for you, reviewing you, talking about you, building buzz about you. So that's all important. And that brings us to brand. Brand is the representation of who you are and what you stand for, even when you're not in the room. And so it's very important that you understand what your brand is, what you want it to be, and that you work to really build the brand that you need to have. Then you've got to communicate your brand. You've got to say, hey, this is what we've got. How are we going to get out to that audience? And how are we going to let them know what it is we can do for them? And then finally, what I call operations, which is making the whole thing run and building the metrics to say, how did we do? What's going on? Have we really done a good job here? So if you think about those things, strategy, market, product, customer, brand, sales, and then operations, you've got the whole picture of what you need to do.
At the beginning of the book, you discuss the many things that have changed in marketing. How has the landscape changed?
So the landscape has changed in that we are no longer passive accepting marketing. There was a time when we had just a few TV stations, manufacturers and brands thought they could tell us what they wanted to know about their products, and we just said, okay, and which brand of peanut butter and which brand of car we're going to buy, etc. And they owned the brand. They said, here are what we're going to say about it in advertising. Here's the color. Here's where it's used. You can't talk about it. It's all ours. What's changed today is, first of all, consumers are no longer passive. We're very much engaged. And so we want to be involved, and we also have this information available to us that we didn't have before. So we have the ability to learn about things, to ask people. We no longer believe what a brand tells us. We believe what we hear from people we know. So whether it's our friends, we say, what do you think? You know, I'm going to buy something, what do you think? But then we go online and we say, what are the reviews? Yeah. What does it say on Amazon? If we're going to read a book, if we're going to buy something, we go and we look at how many stars it's got. Right? So we've got all of that information. Then we start to have conversations online. We talk to people on Facebook and other communities, and what do you think about this? And how did that work? And did you have a good experience? And so we have access to all that information, and that's different. And so the other thing that has to come out of that is that brands have to react to that by saying, we can't just tell you what we want you to know. We have to engage with you. We can't be selling all the time. We have to be providing value. So we have to talk about content, and we have to provide interesting and informative information, not just sales pitches. We have to have conversations. We can't be just talking to you one-on-one, but we've got to engage with you. And we've got to build community. And that doesn't mean every brand needs to have their own community. It means you go to where the community is and you engage and you listen. A lot of brands are still doing too much talking, but you listen to what consumers say and then you make changes about it. We also have the ability to customize products. In my book, I talk about a small company, US-based, that manufactures really interesting looking men's socks. Very cool looking men's socks, and they're custom made. And they make every pair. They could make a whole set of them at once, but they could also custom make them for you. And they go out and they really understand who their customers are. And of course, the only thing I think they're doing wrong is they're not really men's socks, because I think they look great on women too. But that's what you can do. You can bring your services to people in a distant location. I talk about a piano teacher who now uses Skype to teach piano lessons all over the world.
You're kidding.
So, and it was her students who said to her, one student said, I'm moving to Vienna and I want to take lessons. And she's in Vermont. She said, I'm not going to Vienna. And he said, no, why don't we do this over Skype? So, obviously there's some things you can't do, but a lot of things you can.
Yeah.
So you've got to be creative and thinking about that. So one of the things is we have to realize, even though we're living in this digital world, you don't start with social media, you don't start with tactics. You start by understanding the strategy, your markets, your customers, but then you've got to apply them. We're no longer talking about the days when we bought big advertising campaigns on network TV and printed brochures and did everything by US mail. We have other ways of doing things, and we do have ways to reach people very quickly, and we need to be very responsive.
What are some tips you have for building a reputation-based brand and relationship with your customers?
So first of all, Jennifer, it's really important to build the relationship with your customers. And that's really the difference in, I think, companies that are standing out. It's not a transaction, but they build a relationship. And you get equity when you build a relationship. So you do something good for me, and then I like that, you do something again. Maybe the fourth or fifth time, the service isn't quite right in the restaurant, or the food isn't right. I'm willing to give you a little bit of leeway because we have a relationship. It's not just another transaction. And companies who understand that their brand really represents that reputation. And so your brand has to represent the values that you have. So you go into Whole Foods and you know you're going to get things that are going to be maybe locally grown and organic and somewhat healthy, and you're not going to find cigarettes, and you're not going to find artificial sweeteners, and you're not going to find diet soda, etc. If you want those, you need to go somewhere else, because that's who their brand is. So part of it is understanding that and really portraying that. And then the other part is really understanding what's happening with your brand. So a lot of this, again, is listening. Social media are great tools for getting out there and listening to what's being said about your customers, or about your brand, what your customers are saying about your brand. So is everybody happy? Is your brand being used in a way that you're not aware of? Is there something going on, or is somebody upset with you? Is there something happening that's real time? And you can start to do that. And the more that you're involved with that and you're engaged, the better you build that relationship. I've started to see something new, which is what I'm now calling brand activism. So there was a time when if there was news that was potentially controversial, brands shied away from it and they wouldn't go near it. But just a couple of months ago, we had the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage and the whole rainbow idea, and we saw not just cities with rainbow lights, but we saw Coke with rainbow all over their logo, and we saw Starbucks, and we saw all these brands saying, hey, we believe in this, and we're part of this. A similar type of thing after the shooting in Charleston with the Confederate flag, all of a sudden brands were running to take away the Confederate flag, and it was Amazon and it was eBay, but it was also Walmart. Right. You're thinking, really, Walmart, they're in a lot of those southern states, but they said that's not what we want our brand to be affiliated with. We believe that our consumers are telling us that we can't be selling this anymore, and we're reacting. And so those are companies that are really thinking strategically about, we need to be listening to our customers, and our reputation is very important, and we need to be using our brand to build our reputation.
How can we generate demand through content marketing?
So content marketing is really interesting, and content marketing is really taking information that is not sales oriented but is informational and educational and just useful to your customers, and using that as a way to promote yourself as a brand or as a company. And this is something that some companies have done for a while, but it's becoming more and more relevant today. And again, as we realize that our customers aren't here just to be sold to. So what's important is that you can get out there information that's of interest to me, 7 tips to do this, or 5 ways that I might be able to do something I wasn't thinking of. And putting that out there as a way to attract customers to you who might not come to you otherwise, or might be a little bit nervous about, I don't want to find out that I'm going to get on a list I'm going to get sold to. So it's a way for customers to express an interest. You can do what we call drip marketing, which is you have, if you request something, then I might send you something else, and I might send you something else. And it's not till I get over here that I say, do you want a sales rep to call? So it's not right away that I jump in and kind of smother you, but I give you room to interact with me, to get to know me. And this is a way for customers and prospects to really qualify themselves, because if they know that you're providing value and they keep coming back, then they're more likely to engage with you and want to possibly purchase something for you.
Does it help that this sort of helps them to feel in control of the relationship and the touches?
Absolutely, absolutely, because as a consumer I can decide at any point I'm not going any further, and I'm saying I want this, I'd like to find this information, I'd like to find out more about what's going on. And so it really does put the prospect, the customer, the consumer a little bit more in the driver's seat. And it also says, hey, they're here to, I know they're here to sell me something, but they're also here to help me, and they're here to listen to what I've got to say, and that makes a big difference.
How is big data changing market analysis?
Well, it's funny because we have, in the last few years, created more information than I think in the entire history of the universe up till about 2007. And I'll bet in another year or two we'll double that again. So we have so much data, and you think about it, it's not just your computer and your laptop and your tablet and your cell phone, but again, your fitness tracker and your car and your refrigerator and everything that's generating data. So we have all this information. The good news is we're collecting things and we can start to see patterns. So for example, if a car manufacturer says, gee, I'm seeing certain things happen, and right before there's a failure that this thing starts to happen, I can start to warn people, go get your car serviced. Or I can tell people that they need to replace something in the refrigerator. It's time for your filter to be replaced, or it's time to do such and such. So that's useful. The problem is we have so much data we can drown in it. And we can analyze it, and we can analyze it, and we have this rise of a new species sort of data analysts who are incredibly knowledgeable about data, and that we have great analytical tools. So we can analyze the data, and that's good and bad, because we can analyze it till we're blue in the face. And the problem is, how do we take that data and turn it into information, and from information into insights, and then from insights into business judgment. And so we really still need someone that understands the real business strategy and the ideas, and has some expertise that says, wait a minute, I've got all this data here, but what does it all mean? So it's sort of like looking at a pile of Legos of 4 or 5 different colors and saying, how do I get from there to building a replica of the Empire State Building? I have all the Legos there that I need, but how do I turn them into the right patterns, and how do I pick the right ones out so I can build something from it? And that's a real skill. For marketers, it means we have to get closer to the CIOs, to the IT folks, to the people who own and manage the data, because we are now so reliant on that. And CIOs and marketers are kind of cut from different cloth. We tend to be very aggressive, and we tend to want to go out and do things quickly. And the IT folks are a little bit more conservative. They want to make sure the network stays up. They're concerned about security and hackers and breaches and all those things. And we're saying, can you do it faster? Can you do it faster? And they're saying, I'm not sure. So we have to, as marketers, really have to learn how to live with our siblings that are in the IT space and find out how we can work together more efficiently.
What role should employee engagement play in amplifying the brand?
Well, it's interesting because it's almost impossible to have unhappy employees and happy customers. If you've flown on an airline, if you've gone to a restaurant where people are throwing food at you, you know what it's like when you see that the employees are unhappy. So the first thing is, and it's not about making employees happy so much as getting them engaged so that they feel that they're doing something of value. You walk into an Apple store and people are there, they say hello to you and they talk to you and they will spend time with you on your problem. You have geniuses and you have the one-on-one people and you have the people just roaming around saying, can I help you with the latest iPhone? And they are just engaged with employees, and they're not paid on commission. So they are not paid by the number of people they talk to or the amount of business that's there, but they understand the Apple, the values, and they really represent the brand. So when your employees represent your brand effectively, it's wonderful. And when they don't, it can be very, very difficult, and it can really hurt you. And I've seen, and I've got all kinds of examples of organizations where the customer-facing employee doesn't understand the bigger picture about what the organization wants, and they're focused on what's in front of me. I have a rule, I can't break the rule, I have to do this, and it's, hi, I'm the customer, I'm here. Could you look up from the computer? Could you just, if you just talk to me for a minute? And they don't understand the idea of the lifetime value of a customer. If you upset a customer, so they leave, and then they never come back, not only are you losing them, but they're going to you tend to tell 4 or 5 more people if you're upset than if you're happy. So here's what we used to do. We used to go home and tell 4 or 5 people we knew. Now we post it on Facebook and we put it on Twitter and we tell everybody else we vent. And so that just amplified again and again and again. So it is so important to start. Very often employees are kind of thought of afterwards when it comes to marketing. Okay, here's the marketing program, here's what we're doing. But it's also, it's important to step back and say, how do we engage our employees? What does this mean? Are we reflecting the same brand values to our employees that we want to have to our customers? And how do we make sure that our employees understand this and live this on a daily basis?
Give us an example of an organization that does strategic marketing really well.
That's a great question. And there are several I talk about in my book. There are companies like Zillow who created their own marketplace for real estate. When they started out 7 or 8 years ago, there was no online real estate market. So what they had to do was figure out how they could create value, and they became information providers. So they said, let's go get all this data. We're an independent third party, don't represent the homeowners, we don't represent the realtors, we don't represent the government, but we can gather all that information. And they started doing it in a very, very effective fashion so that everybody today now says, gee, let's look at the Zillow report. Yeah. Let's look at that. So they've become kind of ubiquitous. A company like Commune Hotels that I talk about in my book, they started by saying, we want to build a brand and we want to build this value and this purpose throughout our entire organization. So they went and they asked their employees, what are the values that you think we should represent? And they asked everyone from the person who waits on a customer, a hotel guest, to the people back doing the laundry, to the people back who figure out what real estate they should be buying. And they came up with a set of values. And they used that to really drive their marketing as well as their employee engagement and who they hire and basically what their hotels are all about. So there are companies like that. There are also, what I find though is interesting, there are also a lot of smaller companies. A lot of the people who are doing this well are the people that you go and you work with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a restaurant that you go back to, or it's a hairdresser that you like, that you refer, or it's someone that you go to with your kids. It's a place that you go. So a lot of these there are hundreds and thousands of companies that are doing this well. You don't have to be a big organization. You don't have to be Apple, you don't have to be Nordstrom's, you don't have to be a big company. You can do this even if you're a small organization.
How can marketing and sales best work together?
So marketing and sales have this reputation of kind of being these sibling rivals, right? And we love each other and we hate each other and we love to fight, just like typical siblings. And we talk about, we hear a lot about marketing and sales alignment. And to me, alignment is the wrong way to look at it, because alignment says we're out of alignment and we've got to come back like this, and either we're going to be in line or we're going to beat each other up. So rather than coming at it from opposite places, let's come at it from the same perspective, because we do so many things that are similar. And in good organizations that are successful, it's really hard sometimes to figure out where marketing stops and sales begins, and vice versa. So what happens is your salespeople are the people on the front line who are closest to your customers. They're the ones that really understand what's going on. We as marketers sometimes build this stuff and throw it over the wall and say, here, go sell it.
Right.
And
Use
then the
this.
salespeople come back and they say, we need this feature, go build it. And we're sort of stuck. But if we were to take that information back earlier in the process and say, let's have our sales rep bring the marketing people in and let's just sit and watch with tape over our mouths and be very quiet and listen to what they're saying, how they're using our product, what they think about us, that's extremely valuable. The other thing to do is to bring the salespeople who are on the front lines, who are seeing and hearing what's really happening out there with our customers, with our competitors, with other sales situations they're in, bring them in early in the process and say, what's going on out there? So we need to be on the same side rather than coming at it from two different directions. And I think when you do that, then you get this synergy that doesn't happen in a lot of organizations.
You talk about social media and the role that it plays today, but you're coming at this from a very foundational point of view. So when should companies use social media? When do you know that social media is the right channel to use? And how do you use it best?
So what's interesting, that's a great question, Jennifer. What's interesting about social media is there is a wonderful place for it, and that place is different depending on who you are, who your organization is, how mature your product is, and who your customers are. So you need to know, again, what you want to accomplish, what market you're in, who your customers are, and whether or not they're there. So, for example, I've lost track as to how many billions of people are on Facebook, but it's just ridiculous, most of the world. So we think all of our customers are on Facebook, but they're not there necessarily to see you and talk about your product. They're there to talk about their family, their friends, the latest cat video, whatever. So we need to go to the places where customers and prospects are going to be more likely to be receptive. So in some cases it's LinkedIn, in some cases it's Twitter, in some cases it might be YouTube, it might be Pinterest, it might be something else, Instagram. But you're not going to get teenagers, if you're targeting them, in the same place that you're going to get 70-year-olds. You're not going to get 20 and 30-year-olds in the same place that you might get people who are in their 40s and 50s. You may not get women in the same place as men. You may not get different ethnicities. You may not get business to business versus business to consumer. So understanding what your strategy is, and then use the right social media tools. So I like to describe it as having a toolkit, kind of like a contractor, a handyman comes to your house, and he's got a hammer, and he's got a wrench, and he's got a screwdriver. He's got two different screwdrivers, flat and the other one, and he's got all these different things in there, and he doesn't take the hammer out and use it all the time. He uses a hammer sometimes, he uses the wrench, he uses the pliers, he uses the Phillips screwdriver. Depending on the situation, he uses the right tool. And that's what we need to do, is we need to think of social media as a set of tools and use the right tool at the right time to reach our customers.
What are your 5 momentum factors for success?
So the momentum factors are interesting, because as I thought about, you've got these things that haven't changed, the dynamic market leverage factors, you've got the new realities. If you do all of that, will you be successful? And the answer is not necessarily. And so I said, why is that? And there really are some things that make the difference between a marketing organization that is really successful and one that sort of struggles to get out of its own way. In fact, it's something I call static. If I think about noise in the marketplace, there's 2 types of noise. There's the noise that's outside with everyone else talking that you're trying to get through, and then there's the static in your own organization. And that's where you can't even get heard by your own people. And so what you need to do is to clear that static is, first of all, to make sure you have organizational commitment. And that means starting from the top, from the CEO and the executive team, that they are bought into what you're doing. They understand the value of the marketing programs. It's not an expense. It's something that actually they think really adds value. Secondly, you need to make sure you have the right resources. It can be more dangerous to put out a little bit of money into a little bit of marketing than to do none at all. So make sure you're resourced and you have enough money, people, et cetera, to move forward. And third is to have the right people. Because you can have a team that looks great on paper, but if they're not the right people matched to the right skills with the right leader, that's a problem. Fourth is technology. And technology is our friend in most cases, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it gets in our own way. And when we want to have the technology just to say we have technology, the latest systems, the latest software, the latest this and that, I've seen organizations trip over themselves because they're so busy implementing a marketing automation system, tying it to a CRM, and then how we're going to do with this and that, and they can't ever get anything done. So you want to have enough. It's sort of like Goldilocks. You don't want to have too much, you don't want to have too little, you want to have just right, enough technology to keep you going. And then finally, you need to understand your environment. And what I mean by that is, what is the situation the company's in right now? How are they competing? What is it they need to do? And I think one of the big things I talk about is market disruption, which is everything is going along fine and you think your market is stable, and then someone comes and disrupts it. I came here today in an Uber car. Okay, Uber started out a few years ago because taxi cab service was terrible in San Francisco, and someone said, there's got to be a better way. So what happened is they have totally disrupted the local transport business, and you can be Uber, or you could be Lyft, who comes in afterwards and said, we're sort of like Uber, but a little bit less expensive. You could be someone who says, I'm going to do something similar, and I'm going to provide services that are complementary. Or you can be the taxi cabs who are saying, no, it's not fair. Fix this. I want my medallion back, and I paid a lot of money for it, and fix this. The areas where we're seeing people that are really moving forward are where taxi cabs are saying, how can I be more Uber-like? How can I provide that service so I can be competitive? It happened with Airbnb in the hospitality industry. So what's the next industry that's going to be turned upside down? Is your market, which looks nice and safe and comfortable, is your whole business going to be turned upside down? And if so, do you want to be Uber? Do you want to be the people who come after Uber, or do you want to be the people who are sitting there sort of waiting to be Uberized? And my suggestion is you don't want to be the fly waiting to hit the windshield. You want to be the person who says, hey, let's go out and break new ground. So if you look at getting the organization behind you, about having the right people, the right resources, the right technology, and understanding the market and the environment in which you compete, then I think you're going to be able to move forward in a lot more effective fashion.
So ultimately, what does mastery of this look like? How do you know when your organization has been able to rise above the noise?
So how do you know? It's not like you get a bell that rings and something that says you've got 100% grade. So part of this is an ongoing process. But you'll start to see that customers will be coming to you. People will be looking for what you're doing. It's a much less reactive situation. We're not reacting to our competitors. We're not in a price war. We're setting the stage. We're sending out the messages. We're kind of driving things forward. You'll start to see where marketers will feel that they have more of a seat at the table, that they're being asked questions. They're being taken as more of a strategic advisor rather than just go off and implement. I had one client I talked to who the rest of the organization, all they wanted to do was say, marketing, do this, do that. And I wanted to get him a t-shirt that said, would you like fries with that? Because all they did was implement. So when you start mastering marketing, you'll be seen as having some strategic value brought into the conversation earlier. You'll see better return in terms of your investments in marketing. And you'll start to see customers and profitability and revenue, all those good things start to happen.
What technology do you see on the horizon that you think will be most disruptive or change the business landscape the most?
What I'm finding most interesting is, again, this kind of Internet of Things, and the fact that we do have, it's no longer a desktop or a laptop or a tablet or a phone, but that we have all this technology that we're wearing. And it's not necessarily Google Glass, but it's all these other devices that are coming forward. And then the thing that has to come on top of that is, how do we use this in a responsible manner, and how do we leverage that? So I think those are things that are interesting. We certainly see a lot of technologies that are around taking some of the things in the computer and technology side and applying them to medical devices and to healthcare. So I think as we merge some of that technology and we bring some of the things we understand, there's some really interesting things that might happen in the healthcare space. So I think we're on prime for a revolution, not necessarily in how we pay bills and all of that business side of it, but how healthcare is delivered. The fact that we can deliver healthcare remotely now. Again, you can take all of your data if you're a diabetic and you're testing your blood sugar, if you're testing your cholesterol, if you're testing your your blood pressure. All that data can be automatically sent back to a medical provider and not just analyzed, but it can also be part of amalgamated into a bigger database to say, what are the patterns here that we haven't seen before? Is there something we need to tell this person out there to do before they get into trouble? So how can we prevent some of these diseases, not necessarily prevent them ever from happening, but stop people before they get too far down the wrong path? So I think there's all kinds of interesting opportunities there. And if I knew what they were, I'd be investing in them, but I don't, so it's all a guess, yeah.
Linda, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your expertise and your book with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It was fun.
This is Sartor TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.